my name is, oh, hang on one second. My name is Carrie Gopher. I work for the OPI. I'm the American Indian Student Achievement Director. And today we have Kristiny Preston-Lorett. Kristiny is an 8th to 12th grade English teacher at the Rocky Boy Junior Senior High School. She's originally from Texas. Kristiny moved to Montana in 2006, where she attended the Montana State University Northern and obtained her secondary education English degree with a minor in reading. She then pursued her master's degree in counseling. She saw the need for that counseling degree. Kristiny has worked for the Rocky Boy High School on the Chippewa-Cree Reservation in Rocky Boy, Montana for the past 12 years. Her opportunities have been endless. She's been such an asset for our community, from teaching to counseling, to committees, to after-school programs, to running grants, to decolonizing and indigenizing curriculum and the practices within the school system. It has been an adventure for our community having Kristiny with us. She is for the students. She is about the students. She's also an adjunct for our Stonechild Community College, Stonechild College. Here we have it, Mrs. Kristiny Lorett.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I'm so excited to be here. I am so humbled and honored when I look at all the other speakers and presenters. I just really feel nothing but gratitude to be asked to speak today. I have been at Rocky Boy Schools, finishing up year 13, and I have loved my time so very much. My students are my world, and we fit kind of everything around them. And that's a big strength to see our school. So when we talk about Indigenous student success, it's really difficult to take that huge, important concept and then say, in OPI's rankings, we are a school who tests very, very low. We are in that hard bottom category. And so when we had national consultants come in, they actually have given us our data results and said, you are so student focused. This is a strength at your entire district. And that is so important, and what they want to see move forward in other places. So we can address other things, but as long as we are keeping the students in mind, what is best for them, that they feel that as well, we can be in a really great place. So let's go on this journey together. Here we go. So let us start here. So sorry, we're gonna go back a little bit. Oh, okay. Sorry, I really tried. But we do all sorts of fun things. And one of those is just try different things all over the place. So I'm just gonna share, there's a lot of buttons in the way. We actually practice this. So of course it doesn't work after a flawless practice. Okay, strong, educated, Indigenous. This is so important in our schools. We want our young men and our young women to feel this beautiful power that has risen up in these last few years, to where they feel seen and heard nationally, locally, and in school. Students want to feel their identity represented. And so as an advocate and a non-Indigenous person, I really want to make sure that that's reflected in my classroom. My students feel that love coming through so strongly. And I bring that every day, is my hope and prayer. So starting off, no matter how open-minded, socially conscious, anti-racist I think I am, I still have old, learned, hidden biases that I need to examine. It's my responsibility to check myself daily for my stereotypes, prejudice, and ultimately discrimination. So it's so important to know that we can all change and move and grow wherever we are at in life, whatever our identification is, We know that there is more to learn and grow. And that is my favorite definition, actually, of the word humble, is to be teachable. And so as a value of our community in Rocky Boy, and I say "our," even though I know I'm just the redheaded stepchild add-on, that humbleness is so important. So being teachable, especially in this area, is just vastly important. So just a little bit more about myself. I have been there for 13 years. I included our 2018 staff picture because I just have to tell you, we didn't know it was the glory years, but it really was such a golden age of staffing pre-pandemic. We were fighting the good fight, doing these great things, and it was just so normal to us. So I look back on that year in particular, and I just have so much love for all of the staff who were there. And that is what this presentation is about. This presentation is how a community of teachers inside of a community can come together and really make these changes happen. So I wanted you to see these wonderful faces because each of them has done something so glorious. And it may not be overt, it may not make the papers, but it really should, because they are rock stars. And all of this exists in the gorgeous Chippewa-Cree community. If you have not been out to Rocky Boy, you should really put it on your list. It is stunning. And right now, as you turn the hill, it's all green and lush and gorgeous. So come and visit. I have 3 crazy kids. I'm technically a South Texan. That's how I identify. But I am a military person. My parents are from San Diego. We deployed to Panama for 4 years, where my sister is from. She is Kuna. Then we went to Georgia, Central Texas, and then finished in South Texas. I've been here for 16 years. All 3 of my babies are Montana babies. And my family is giant and very culturally diverse. So I do have to say my earliest teachers were my parents, who brought in such a love and respect for other communities and other ways of living, especially as we went throughout the military, that we could just learn so much from so many others. And that is a great way to live. So the terminology I'm going to be using today is I'm going to focus on the word Indigenous. All right. So other phrases we hear are Native American, American Indian. I'm going to focus on the word Indigenous. A lot of the curriculum I use is from Canada. And of course, Havre, Rocky Boy, we are right on that Canadian border. And a lot of our students actually hold dual citizenship. So the word Indigenous is really important in our area. So I'm going to share this quick YouTube video with you. It's lovely. I hope you enjoy it. And I share this with all age levels. So even though it's a kid's small video, enjoy.
What is indigenous?
It means originating or occurring naturally in a particular place.
So, indigenous people are...
Me. Hi, Sid. Hi, Ruby. Indigenous people are the first people to be living in a place. Indigenous people, like me, have lived here for over 12,000 years, long before it was even called Canada. Around 1.4 million people identify as Indigenous in Canada today.
Hi, Sunny. You're Indigenous?
Yep, I'm Algonquin First Nation.
So, which word should I use? Indigenous or Algonquin First Nation?
Well, most Indigenous people would rather be called by the title of their nation. Algonquin, Cree, Haida, Mohawk. But if you don't know what nation someone is, it's better to use the word Indigenous.
Is Indigenous the same as Aboriginal, Native, and Indian?
Actually, those words aren't used as often anymore, Sid. In some cases, those words can even be hurtful.
In Canada, there are 3 different groups of Indigenous peoples: the First Nations, the Métis, and the Inuit. The First Nations is the largest and most varied group, and they are found all over Canada. They include my nation, the Algonquin First Nation, and many others like Cree, Haida, Mohawk, Ojibwe. The Métis are the descendants of First Nations peoples and the European settlers who came to Canada, and they are all across the country. Finally, the Inuit are the Indigenous peoples of the Arctic, and they are also found all across the country.
So many amazing groups of people.
That's right. And think about this. Each nation has their own culture with their own languages, laws, and spiritual beliefs. The First Nations alone include over 50 different nations with 50 different languages.
Wow.
Respect!
And those cultures had, and continue to have, a huge influence on Canada, giving it words, inventions, concepts, and games that are used by Canadians today, including that canoe and this kayak. The country's name, Canada, comes from the St. Lawrence Iroquois First Nations word, Kanata, meaning village or settlement.
Thanks for sharing with us, Sunny.
Happy to. And remember, if you know what nation someone is, you can use that to describe them. If not, use the word Indigenous.
Got it. Whoops.
All right, so we're actually going to be hearing a lot from Canadian sources today. Like I said, they are just really on point. Their government has actually provided a lot of funding to provide great authors and artists and creators of all genres to produce Indigenous materials. That representation is so important. I am very excited for the movement of American creators to have that same sort of funding and opportunity that we've seen from our Canadian family to the north. So I want to talk about knowing who your students are. So some of you may be teaching on a reservation, by a reservation. You might have one Indigenous person in your class, which is the case with several schools in Montana. You're going to have a variety of people in your classroom. And one of the big issues is that we make assumptions and we don't always ask. And so staying with best practices is always best, but I wanted to outline how to help educate strong, resilient Indigenous students today. So one, we need to ask what they need, what they'd like, what their ideas are, because our students of any background have a say and they have a voice and they're identifying who they would like to become in this world. And so asking them is so important. Then we have advocating, educating yourself, and educating you using best practices. And one of the most important things is building those relationships, the students and the community. If we leave our community out, we're really only going to get a very small way, because they are the first and most important influence in a student's life. They are their everything, especially culturally. That family component in so many communities just allows us to thrive when we have that important, substantial relationship with both the students and the community. All right, I love including a lot of Cree into this. I still have a small glitch when I say Cree. It sounds like Spanish and Japanese combined, which my students really love and still encourage me, but I don't want to entertain you as such. So I grew up, both of my parents are fluent Spanish speakers, and so I have a small amount of Spanish vocabulary, but my grandfather's also Japanese, and so I have pursued learning that a small bit, so it just comes out funny. But we are learning how important language is to really encourage our students and other people learning languages to go. So let's start with asking, like, what students their barriers are, or their fears when having teachers address them as an Indigenous student. So I asked some seniors, and this response was kind of representative of the group. It had a lot of those components. So I just want to put this out there, especially because our students have so many non-native teachers, even in a tribal community. And this is an authentic feeling. So I wanted to open with this. But this student said, okay, what do teachers want? What do you want teachers to know what not to do about teaching Indigenous students? So this student said not to whitewash Native students like they did back in the day. Show some respect for their culture and how we do things differently. Know our culture and our background. If you're going to be teaching in a Native school, treat Native students the same way you would treat non-Native students, not to single us out when teaching students about Native culture. And so, you know what, I want to point out, for those of you whose brains are like freaking out because the grammar isn't there, I want to honor grammar. To me, and I'm an English teacher, is not as important as the authenticity of the message. So let's just set anything that you see about this as a writing piece to the side, because this was an emotional response. And so I really want to value it as an emotional response. So our families in this country and in Canada have within 2 generations experienced substantial trauma in the school system. So I want to honor that and say that we have students who have come from homes with a lot of fear. And so that is really important to know, that when a student who is young says like they did back in the day, that's a very real connection for her. So showing respect for culture and how we do things differently. That's really important as well. And sometimes we don't realize the faces we make or the piles that we step in when we say or do things outside of that. And so again, that's part of that self-reflection and open to change. Get to know the Indigenous cultures of your students and their backgrounds. If you're going to be teaching in a Native school or just in general, know the backgrounds of your students. Treat them the same way you would treat non-Native students. So they don't want to feel singled out. They don't want different terminology. They don't want anything out of the ordinary that you wouldn't do to another student, because again, that self-identity for especially teenagers in general is really heightened. So let's make sure that they feel like they belong. And I also want to specifically talk about this. It happened in a college class that I was taking at Stonechild College last semester. And a teacher really turned to the students and was asking cultural questions. But even in a college class, a lot of these students were, you know, they were just out of high school. They were in their young 20s, and they didn't really feel like it was their place to appropriately culturally respond to the questions being asked to them. And so when we want to information gather, we need to make sure that we're going to a mentor teacher, to mentor text, to educate ourselves, so that we can make sure that we're not seeking knowledge through a student that they might not have to give us, or it may not be appropriate for them to give us, because they are still very young in their knowledge gathering at this point. So let's find appropriate places to seek information from. And if you don't know who that is, ask the other staff members at your school. All right, I want to talk to advocacy. This is my favorite word. It is not a big secret that our particular building has gone through a series of principals. And in the last 13 years, I've been lucky enough to be there for almost all of them. And I brought a kid in and was speaking with the principal, and they looked me square in the face and said, "You are not an advocate. That is not your job." And I felt so vindicated, because when we're looking at the best practices, when we're looking at that, they really talk about teachers as advocates. And I'm just like, yes, we need to speak up for our students. We also need to speak up for updating our curriculum and then creating a space for all learners. And this is one of the things that I really want each of us to go away with, if you have not already, is that Indigenous culture is not just history. So my students go to a different school district, and when they study anything that's regarding Indigenous, it's always at least from the 1800s. I have seen nothing in the last 5 years come home about anyone who is Indigenous in the last 50 years. And that is a huge area where we can advocate for student success. Students need to know they're not a history book. Their culture is not a history book. This is a movement. It's as if we taught about world religions from 200 years ago. There are people living and loving their cultures today, and we really need to celebrate that. We can dip our toe in the water of history, but we just need to be able to get to a place where we can thrive with people around us now. So a lot of people have come to me if they find out, oh, you work at Raggy Boy, like, what can we do? Like, where are resources? So one that was pre-OPI, Indian Ed for All, lots of resources on there, but there are so many more that are growing. So I look forward to sharing that with you. All right, here we go. Let the education begin. So you can help your students become more successful when you yourself are more educated. So let's learn different pathways to do that. So these few slides are put together by our fabulous curriculum coordinator, Desiree Pellichet. I just can't tell you how hard she has worked the last several years to put these resources together, because they are so life-changing for educators, thereby life-changing for our students. And when we're taking this material into the community as well, it's so fun to share. It's so fun to share. So we have historical texts up here, we have educational resources, and we have a list of novels. And I have to tell you, so I have listened to Firekeeper's Daughter on Audible. I highly recommend the Audible version. The actress who embodies this piece, she is so spot on. For several years, I was looking for a novel with a regular guy as the hero, and it is so hard to find a regular guy who doesn't have all sorts of like crazy stuff going on, because I don't want my students to necessarily spend 200 to 300 pages in a novel that's wholly depressing. I am a big advocate of finding beauty and truth and resilience in our reading materials. So Moon of the Crusted Snow, okay, by Wab Rice. Oh my gosh, I love this book. I do have to tell you, it is full of F-bombs, but in that dialogue is accurate for our area and for our neighbors to the north. It is a Canadian story, but it is so good, you guys. It is so, so good. If you read it yourself, if it has too many F-bombs for your district, I am so lucky to live in a district where we are able to really say what is best for the student. Let's go ahead and let's get this great material in front of them, because I had a classroom full of boys who needed to see a protagonist that could be themselves in 5 years. And this is this book, and that's great. So educate yourself, open yourself up to some new literature that's coming out. Neither Wolf Nor Dog. This is on my summer list. I've had a lot of the great women in my life actually do this. This is on Audible as well, and love it. Moon of the Crusted Snow, I just also have to tell you, is having a sequel come out very, very, very soon. The pandemic really put it in the back burner. My kids read this, my students read this their freshman year. And so we were so excited their sophomore year to have it. And now we're in their junior year. So I just want to make sure that it gets ordered for their senior year, because it's great to see, especially your boys, so excited for a sequel to a novel. I mean, who would have thought? And it's everything an English teacher's dream. Okay, moving on. So podcasts. This is the land that I love, you guys. If you live in Montana, we spend a lot of time on the road, and podcasts are the way to spend that time really, really wisely. So I want to say I started off with Unreserved by Rosanna Deerchild. She is phenomenal. She's also one of the amazing Indigenous poets out there. So you can actually find her work in a lot of anthologies. And she's such a great host. This is where I found so much information for my classroom, as I would listen to her podcasts and find different ones. She did a whole podcast on other Indigenous podcasts. She did a whole podcast on, hey, there is this book festival. Let's hear from all the artists coming up. And what I did is I just wrote everybody's names down and wrote all that stuff up, looked up what was coming. And that's how I found Moon of the Crested Snow. So it's going to take a little bit of work on your part to add these things in. But once you have them, the whole world opens up. And that's just amazing. So all of these can be found at cbcpodcast.ca. Again, we're going to just say thank you to our neighbors to the north. So that is great. Okay, more of my personal favorite podcast that I absolutely love. So there is Story Keepers, which Wab Rice, who did write Moon of the Crested Snow, he co-hosts Story Keepers, and they interview authors, Indigenous authors. Now, I do have to just tell you, FYI, on these three, one, they're big fans of talking openly and honestly about a lot of different issues. So not necessarily something you want to have on for like littles all around. But some of the stories that they're going to talk about, they're very open about all genres. So just FYI on that. So not all podcasts might be for all listeners, just like all books are not for all people. Okay, The Secret Life of Canada. I can, again, not tell you much how I love this. So my grandfather is Japanese and was put in a camp during World War II. And that's a huge part of our family story. But they did a podcast on what happened to Japanese Canadians during World War II. And I had no idea. I literally no idea until I listened to an episode all about it. And I was like, holy cow. So I just love this, especially if you're really into history. This is amazing. It unfolds. And they do make a lot of American references as well. It's so interesting how our two countries are so interlinked. And then if you just need some bonus aunties in your life, let me tell you, 2 Crees in a Pod is everything that you need. So, and I just love this caption. It's unapologetically creating space for Indigenous resurgence. The show's intention is to disrupt Western colonial systems and honor Indigenous helping practices. It's so blunt. It is so real. They are social workers by trade. They are well-educated women who are bringing you very important material in a very playful, let's talk about it like we're talking about it, you know, on our couch at home, having a good night. So they're not going to mishmash around things. So definitely want to listen to before assigning something to students. But again, amazing. Documentaries that are out there. Angry and Nook is one that I do show my students. We also do Gather. And so Something in the Water, We Will Stand Up. These are all ones that you can find on your Roku. So wonderful, wonderful, wonderful opportunities for you to see things in a different way. We live kind of in a closed community, and we don't always have access to amazing information that's happening around the world and in our own communities. So these are some great places to start from. And I do want to talk about Gather for a quick second, because it's talking about Indigenous food sovereignty, and that is a growing movement. So when you're educating yourselves, knowing the movements that are happening in Indigenous communities, that also ties to what's important to the students. So the missing and murdered Indigenous peoples movement, food sovereignty, these things are great ways to tie into your classroom and have conversations that show your students that you are authentically interested in what is happening. All right, we have been growing as a staff as well, because it's one of the hard things that if you just grow in your classroom, but the 3 people down the hallway don't have any of this movement, staff book groups are a great way to do that. Now, these can be as hard or as easy as you'd like. So these are the ones we were able to purchase this last year, and we didn't get through them as fast as we thought. We were like September, October, November, December, and that did not happen. we are getting through like 2 books a year at this point, and that's okay because it's really important to heavy material. And that way it also gives us as a staff a vocabulary to work with our students. And every single time I have read one of these books, it has gone into a lesson in my classroom. And this is how your students feel seen. This is how they feel heard. So white fragility, when I finish this, and this is a hard one to get through because it really challenges so much around us, especially if you have a family that's mine that is multicultural. It's very easy for people like my parents or myself, be like, well, my sister's Indigenous, so we're good. Like we're not racist, obviously. It really allows you to be challenged and think differently in a format that you may not have before. The Audible is a little kind of hard to get through. I'm not a fan of the narrator per se, but I will have to say the information is so important. When I outlined this for my students, we outlined it in a college writing class, and it was just a really odd day. I had 2 of my boys show up that day, and our national consultant came in, Josh Flores, and he came in. The students led the discussion, and at the end of it, Mr. Flores was like, can we just take your kids on the road and they can present at things like this? And I was like, aren't they amazing? Like, they're so great. And when you provide them information that is current and real and very much part of already what they're thinking and feeling, they have an avenue and a vocabulary to express that. So it's really, really important to dive into this system of learning. So yes. Okay, great. This is another one. I can never speak about this enough because it helps your overall wellness as an educator. Elena Aguilar, Onward is her book. I know this is really popular in a lot of districts, but cultivating emotional resilience in educators. If you are well as a person, you're going to be well in the classroom. And that's where we're seeing a large disconnect, is that our classrooms that are not successful don't have people in them who are taking care of their overall wellness. And so no longer are we just saying, get enough sleep, eat a balanced diet. Here's all the coffee you want. Hey, there's 3-day-old cake in the break room. Just get through it. We are saying, let's see where we are emotionally. Let's see where we are in taking care of our emotions, our trauma, our histories, our socialization, because it's very hard to communicate with a parent if your emotional and social education is very, very low and limited. You're not going to be able to build those relationships because you're not able to you don't have those skills. And it's literally a skill deficit. Guess what? We are in the business of teaching skills. We are in the business of filling deficits. So this is a great tool to be able to do that. All right. So I really want to talk about my kids. I know I have talked so much. I'm so sorry. And I feel like I don't have that much time left, but this is the most important thing. So, and my goal is not to cry on you, but I really love talking about my kids so much. So how can you eliminate barriers so your students can succeed inside of school? The very first thing we need to do is we need to ask kids, like, what is getting in their way? And so then when you have those answers, find student leaders to help you figure that out and problem solve. To facilitate that. Now, we as the teachers, as the adults, okay, we're the skeleton, we're the skeleton, but they are the muscle. So we walk together through these things. During the pandemic, we had no idea how to handle our backpack program. We have a food pantry that we go through, and every week we give backpacks full of hygiene, household essentials, and food. And we didn't really know how to do that. So it turned into a drive-through food drive. And our whole staff came out. And so basically at this point, the only thing they were doing was very quiet. So again, let's go back to those rock stars. Our business teacher came up with a plan to say, hey, if everybody donates 5, 10, 15, or $20 every paycheck at the beginning of the year, they sign a little form and it comes out and you don't notice, it goes into this bank. And we were able to have funds to buy the entire district whatever they needed for this backpack program. And our third grade teachers, just a quick shout out, they each gave like $20 every paycheck out of that because they had kids in their classroom they wanted taken care of. And this way, this team could do it. And they were supporting it, but again, quietly. So they weren't making the paper, they weren't making anything, but their contribution made it all happen. The same thing happened with Operation Help Santa. Operation Help Santa came, we read the Chippewa-Cree Constitution in our class, and then we looked at different Indigenous communities that were thriving. And what we saw is that communities that thrived really took care of each other. So then I had 2 English classes and they had to come up with a service project of how are we going to take care of people? And it was in November. So I had one class do a cookie plate giveaway at a basketball game. And I had the other class say, hey, there's kids who I know don't get Christmas presents. Let's fundraise and buy them Christmas presents. They held pop shoots. They held, I think we sold cheese fries, and we helped 50 kids that year. And it was only supposed to be 25. I literally cried when it went to 50 because I had no idea how we were going to do it. But now today, it has turned into helping the entire school district. And now we have community financial support to where basically every year, they if I don't send them a letter or Mona doesn't send them a letter, they're like, hey, it's getting close to Black Friday. Do you guys need your check? You know, like, oh, yes, we do. Thank you so much. And our students go and they talk to the tribal council. They work with each of these entities to fundraise, to shop, to wrap all the presents. And the last day before winter break, one of the students dresses up as Santa and hands out gifts to the entire school district. And that is so special. For the young man who plays Santa, I have seen every year for the last decade a significant change in their hearts because that's something that they never expected to experience. And for my students who are the elves who do all these things, that level of service, that level of giving, truly, we are so grumpy and tired by the end, but the first classroom you get into of kindergartners, to give them Christmas presents and they open them, we ask their teacher permission. And of course, it's all set up beforehand. And when teacher says yes, and they open their gifts, that moment changes their lives for the better. So we do this also with partnering for winter coats, school supplies, and backpacks. These things help eliminate barriers. And I also want to talk about kids who transfer into your school. What I have seen is it is almost always the kids who transfer during the year who need the school supplies and backpacks the most. Because at the beginning of the year, it's just something that, you know, as Americans, we just, you know, all the school supplies are on sale at Walmart. There's extra programs to do that. So always hold back school supplies and backpacks for your transfer kids. But ask what your kids need. Ask what helps them. All right, so let's communicate differently. These are Padlet links that I am really not good at. Hyperlinking because I'm the English teacher. That's what I'm going to say. I'm just going to say I'm the English teacher. So I pulled them up right here. But if you haven't used Padlet before, again, I'm going to sing the praises of Desiree Pellichet because she has taken this and she and Josh Flores have taken this to a new level. This is a communication tool for our school district. So if you want to know about Rocky Boy Schools, here's all the links and information. And she's included the tribal leaders who founded our reservation. If you want to know our instructional framework, okay, and our high school checklist. And here is Mr. Josh Flores right here, teaching us amazing things. explicit instruction, so important. I cannot say this enough. In my last 5 minutes, I'm so sorry. The most important things are at the end, but explicit instruction is so important. Explicit vocabulary instruction is so important for every single teacher. And so there's all these links. We have how to use Teams and go through that. Our lesson plan template, our curriculum map template, classroom management. We are diving into restorative practices and restorative circles in school. And so we have that. So, and our testing calendar and monthly progress monitoring. Because we are so grant funded, being on a reservation, we cannot have regular funding because we're on federal land. So it puts us in a really weird spot. So we're heavily grant funded, and those grants all require assessment tools. So not only do we have state assessments, but we have assessments upon assessments for our assessments. So keeping all of that in order gets a little wild, all of that data. So putting that together. So she also included a different Padlet just for testing. Okay, so this is what it could look like to communicate is your testing calendar and checklists, your website, your WIDA, your ACT, your Science Montcast, you know, all going here. And this is really powerful because a lot of times we feel like we don't know and we get hurried. And I want to tell you, thank you so much for being here this weekend, because this is right before graduation. We had a huge Cognia and OPI visit on Friday. And it was really hard because we had senior grades due. So I had to leave a classroom full of seniors who were all in like on the edge of needing all these things. And I needed to go into this really big, important meeting. And so sometimes, especially at this time of year, we feel like we are very tired and we have fought the good fight and there's still a month to go. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for all of your efforts. And just a couple more things, I promise. So we decided to make our instructional framework with our cultural community. So we have this amazing framework right here, sorry. So we put the child in the middle because again, everything is student focused at Rocky Boy Schools. Where is the student? And so we used this, and even the artwork you see that surrounds this is so important to the community. So when we do these things, keep in mind where you are, keep in mind what's around you, and how does that work together? And having the entire building on board with this has taken a lot of years. And this year, I'm leaving, I'm relocating. And so there's also, I think, 6 other staff members from our building who are retiring or leaving. It's been a really tough go of it. And so having these practices in place that we have loved and worked so hard to create are really important for these future generations of teachers who are coming in next. Just 2 more minutes. So I'm really gonna go through this, but relationship building. How comfortable are you talking to parents? Where are you with the lines of relationship building with students? And how have things changed since the pandemic? I will tell you, there is so much that has changed. There is a lot of that relationship building that is very, very fluid right now, where I need to get in contact with most of my parents on Facebook. And our district had a very no Facebook policy, and we got on Facebook. And that's where our parents lived. That's where some of our students lived. So that's where we really needed to be. And it made our parents' lives so much easier and better because they're on social media. And we also want to say, please leave judgments out the door. Our parents are doing the best they can with what they have. And we don't know their whole story, and they don't know your whole story. So when you talk to these people, come to them full of all the love and light they have for their kids, because they do. No matter where they are in this world, they want their kid to be successful. They want their kid to be loved. They want their kid to have joy. And so when you're building that with them, thank them, because they really can carry so much, even if it doesn't fit what your idea of successful parenting looks like. they are really doing their best. Have so much compassion and empathy for them, for these family members who might be raised